day 3 we were finally in pure sightseeing mode. We'd arrived. We were staying in Ballyvourney for a second night, which allowed us to travel light, taking in the Ring of Kerry with minimal luggage. In our case, we didn't complete the full ring, but instead took a run inland to visit Mole's Gap, Ladies' View and Muckross Lake, before heading into Killarney, where we'd planned to stop for our evening meal. Following advice from a mate who lived locally, we tackled the ring in a clockwise direction to avoid getting stuck behind tour coaches which tend to travel anti-clockwise and which are difficult to pass on the windy roads. Initially we headed along the coast to Caer Daniel, stopping for a breather in the village of Sneem, where a lovely lady saw our Manx number plates and came over for a chat. She asked whether I could give her a lift back to the Isle of Man. I think she was joking, but thought I'd better check whether she was married or not. She said she was, but it wouldn't be a problem as her hubby would no doubt be happy to pack her bags for her. Making a swift exit, we headed for our next stop, the Smugglers Inn, just past Waterville village, on the west side of the ring. However, in an epic planning fail, it turned out to be shut when we rocked up, and the local golf club didn't seem too enthusiastic about feeding bikers in full gear, so we headed back to the village of Waterville for a spot of lunch. Stopping at the Beacon Cove Cafe in Waterville for a coffee and a snack, Pike gained some useful intel from some cyclists who were sitting at his table, and we followed their recommendation for evening grub at the Mills Inn, just a shortish walk from our hotel back in Ballyvourney. Sometimes when you're on tour, you just need to be flexible and go with the flow. Leaving Waterville, we continued on the ring route via Caer Savine. The roads were generally flowing and quieter than expected, and the scenery was magnificent, just what we'd hoped for. When we reached Carra Bridge, on the northeast part of the ring, we turned off and headed south and inland. The roads were very windy and progress was gentle as a result, but the countryside was for me even more impressive than the coastal route we'd followed in the morning. A highlight of the afternoon's meanderings was a stop at the super peaceful and picturesque Licheen Wood, which of course played nicely to everyone's inner photographer. The ride continued through Mole's Gap and we headed towards Killarney, taking in the famous Ladies' View, through tight and technical hilly bends and surrounded by a dramatic backdrop. Once through Killarney, we headed directly back to Ballyvourney and our hotel. The N22 is generally unremarkable, but the final section of around 8 miles before we reached our hotel was flowing and twisty, and it was good to get in some great corners in before we stopped for the evening. A quick refresh and it was off to the Mills Inn, which set us up nicely for day 4. Leaving behind the Ring of Kerry, we set off northwards, taking in some of the Dingle Peninsula. I'd heard that the best views were to be had by approaching the town of Dingle from the north via the Connor Pass. This meant our route took on a rather awkward, convoluted figure of 8, but anything for a view, right? We set off in superb weather, and after a short climb, we were rewarded with spectacular views as promised. As we parked up, our very own Pike reminded me that he suffered from a rare and particularly severe form of vertigo. I can't go into details here, but, well, being a bunch of lads on tour, we naturally gave his predicament a stiff ignoring, and we set off to Dingle Town for a coffee. We arrived in the town in total sunshine, only to be greeted by a sharp downpour just minutes later. However, it cleared up nicely on our way to our lunch stop, Sammy's Bar at Inch Beach. After a particularly nice helping of seafood chowder, we pushed on towards the Flying Boat Museum at Foyne, just in time to see them close up. No matter, we helped ourselves to a coffee and took a gander at the tailplane which protruded from the side of the museum building, and then stopped for an obligatory schoolboy selfie. Once more into the breach, dear friends. The team set off along the Wild Atlantic Way once again, heading north to Galway and taking in some highlights along the way. Our first stop was at Spanish Point Beach. The name marks a rather sad moment in history. In 1588, a number of ships from the Spanish Armada were wrecked here. We were advised by a local walker to take a stroll up the coast, and it was great advice. Everyone took the chance to grab a photo or three, and after a quick snack stop, we headed back to the bikes to carry on up the coast. If you take a close look, you'll notice that after 5 days on the road, the team is now walking, if not riding, in close formation. Still, you take the wins where you can. We followed a mix of B roads and a more flowing route along the coast to our stop at Instalment and the scenic Cascades. Located just downstream of the Innar River, the Cascades are made up of a long run of natural rock ledges. Travelling into the town, we turned off the main street into a low-level car park next to the Burn restaurant to check out the relaxing but impressive river scene. We stopped for lunch in the terrace restaurant overlooking the Cascades, and then after a while remounted our bikes to head off for the cliffs of Moher. Arriving at the cliffs, we encountered a pay car park with toll booths at the entrance and a charge of €12 each. Well, about half of us did, with the others keeping their dosh dry. The attraction isn't a place you'd come for peace and solitude, as the crowds here are pretty big. The cliffs were genuinely impressive though, and I was glad that a few of us stuck to the plan. Those that didn't stop at the cliffs found a cafe a few miles further on and settled down for a break. After having an intense chat with the cliff's parking officer, and being summarily moved on, that is. After a while, the escapees got in touch, and they told us where they'd stopped and asked us to join them. Naturally, we scrambled to our bikes without delay, as there wasn't a moment to lose. With the major sights of the day behind us, we finally set out for our evening stop on the outskirts of Galway, pausing briefly a few times, of course, to take in the many views of the west coast.